I'm here, sir.
Okay, shall we start, ma'am?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. And the house rules, except the faculty who is discussing the case and except the resident who is discussing the case, all others please keep it in mute and video should be in the off mode. This is to save the bandwidth. Okay. And if you have any doubts, you can post at the end of the discussion. Please don't post the questions and the answers to the question when we ask the resident. It is just like giving tips, no? So please, if you have any differential diagnosis, you can post it toward the end and ask questions in the chat box. So with this, we start. Good evening, everybody. Be ready. Okay.
And what we plan is you have to ask more questions on the history, because we thought history taking is important. So we give you a lead, and then you have to take over from there as to how you would approach this patient if he or she comes to the outpatient clinic. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Ma'am, my patient is a 47-year-old female, homemaker by occupation, presented with complaints of generalized itching since 2 weeks, jaundice since 2 weeks, ma'am. So this onset is sudden onset or insidious onset?
You just tell us what all things you will ask and what is the reason for that.
Yeah, just tell all the questions that you would ask this patient.
Okay.
Yes, sir. First, I'll ask the
and why you ask those questions. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. It's a sudden onset or acute onset or insidious onset. Duration of symptoms, already duration will be 2 weeks, and then progression of the symptoms. Either it will be progressively increasing the jaundice or intermittent jaundice, because progression increasingly progressive maybe.
Just remember, 2 weeks is too short a duration, okay, for progression. So what question? A patient comes to you in the outpatient clinic with, and I'm passing high colored urine for 2 weeks. What are the first few questions that you would ask this patient? Patient is 47-year-old. First, the patient says, I'm passing yellow colored urine and my eyes are yellow for the last 2 weeks. What questions would you ask? That's all, very simple. This is an outpatient case.
Yes, ma'am. So associated with any history of fever, high grade fever or low grade fever, and is there any associated with the history of any abdominal pain?
What are those known as? That is prodrome.
When a patient comes with jaundice, would you not ask first, what are the 3 common causes of jaundice? Hepatocellular, what are the 3 common causes of hepatocellular jaundice?
Viral hepatitis, ma'am, and drug-induced and
alcohol, that's all. So when you start the patient with jaundice, first is you ask, do you have any prodromal symptoms? What are the prodromal symptoms you'll ask for?
Fever, generalized weakness, fatigue, and rash, ma'am. Body pain.
So there are some viva questions there. They do ask, how would you know it's A, B, or E? So keep all these questions in mind. The first will be prodromal symptoms. So that's the first thing you ask. So one, prodromal symptoms may be present, may not be present. That is number 1. What next will you ask after that?
And associated with any abdominal pain, ma'am.
Not pain. First is, again, I said, no drugs. Has she been taking any medication prior to the onset of jaundice? So
yes,
we said 3 common causes, we said, no? So if you say patient gives history of jaundice, then you say patient was asymptomatic until first week of May of 2021. Until then, she was perfectly normal. Then she noticed yellow discoloration eyes and urine. Antedating the onset of jaundice, there is no history of anorexia, nausea, vomiting, blah, blah, blah. Nor has she been on any long-term medication. That's all that you need to say. And then say, the jaundice started on 5th of May, give a date. They always like the temporal relationship. That what was the date or the month or the year. And then say, since then, she's noticed yellow, which has been steadily increasing till this date. What I usually tell is just draw a graph, no? Just draw a graph. You don't even have to write anything. Draw the graph and say whether it has been increasing. This 2 weeks will not be waxing and waning, no? It is still in the initial phase.
Yes, ma'am.
So what else will you ask? Now, what you should do is finish off the jaundice, all that you want to tell, and then try to see whether it could be intrahepatic or it could be extrahepatic. That's all. That's all that you have to say. So now tell what questions will you ask?
And then I'll ask any history of after ruling out the causes, then I'll ask any associated with abdominal pain, ma'am. type of abdominal pain, either it's a dragging type of pain or colicky type of pain. If pain is persistent, uh, or it's in more in right upper quadrant or epigastric region. Is there any?
Pain is an important question. Yes. So you ask for pain, but you want to know whether it's a visceral pain or you want to know whether it is a colicky pain.
Colicky pain.
Okay.
And then I'll ask about any history of loss of weight and loss of appetite.
Not weight loss and loss of appetite. Next is you want to know whether it's cholestatic or hepatocellular, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Next is you want to know whether it's cholestatic or hepatocellular. So what questions would you ask for hepatocellular versus vis-a-vis cholestatic?
Any previous history of jaundice?
Previous history and the present history, what would you ask for cholestasis? What questions would you ask for cholestasis?
Generally, pruritus, ma'am.
What else?
Pruritus, abdominal pain, and
what will be the color of the stool?
Yeah, okay, ma'am. Associated with either it's a pale clay colored stools or pale colored stools, will ask, ma'am.
So don't use the word clay color. Clay is China clay. Okay, so you just say the word pale stool. So patient, that's what you want to know.
Okay, ma'am.
So can you get pruritus and passage of pale stool with intrahepatic jaundice? Intrahepatic causes of jaundice?
Yes, ma'am. Possible, ma'am. If when involves intrahepatic cholestasis, it's possible, ma'am.
Such as?
Ma'am?
When can you get intrahepatic causes of cholestatic jaundice?
If primary biliary cholangitis.
Come on, yeah. Intrahepatic. Common causes in your day-to-day practice. What are the common causes of cholestatic?
Drug-induced liver injury, ma'am.
One. Number two.
And any viral hepatitis.
Yes. So viral hepatitis goes to the hepatocellular, then it goes to cholestatic, and then it resolves. So these are the common things that you'll ask. Once you finish that, then you mention about the fever, abdominal pain and fever. Okay. Dr. Varghese, you can ask some questions.
Yeah, I think most of the issues have been covered. That is, one is prodrome, and if it is a longer duration, whether there is fluctuation, pain, whether fever continues into the illness. That is, even if the patient didn't have fever initially, whether patient has fever until subsequently.
What's the importance, doctor? Why did Dr. Varghese mention this? Jaundice, the fever continuing with the onset of jaundice. What does it indicate? Or fever subsides?
If it's a low-grade fever, usually malignancy will be associated with low-grade fever, ma'am.
What happens in viral hepatitis? What happens to the fever in viral hepatitis in jaundice at sea?
Jaundice, usually it will resolve. Fever will resolve after developing.
That is important. So the fever resolves, then it means it's more of a viral hepatitis. Whereas the fever continues, that means there is some obstructive symptom or something that is inflammation or infection that is causing the fever. Okay, so that point absolutely very, very important. Okay, Dr. Varghese, any other?
No, I think this much part in the initial part.
Fine. So this is the initial history that you take when the patient comes in. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. So incidence onset of pruritus generalized, initially mild, but within 1 week increased in severity, leading to disturbance in sleep. Had reddish skin rashes at multiple places on face, limbs, trunk for first 3 days, then faded. Jaundice increased over 2 weeks. Mild loss of appetite since 2 weeks. Feeling of tiredness for 4 weeks. Had nausea postprandially since the onset of jaundice. No vomiting, no abdominal pain. Took indigenous treatment, not better, hence came for further evaluation.
Now, just note this: there is feeling of fatigue. So the duration of it, so the onset is fatigue for 4 weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then jaundice and pruritus for 2 weeks. So that's the sequence of events in this patient.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what do you think?
Well,
you want to attach importance to that fatigue?
Yes, ma'am. I want to ask about, is there any history of melena?
What else?
Okay, what do you want to know? Why are you asking for history of melena? What do you want to know?
Sir, it's like because of future suggestion of cholestatic jaundice with melena to rule any periampular carcinoma causing
Okay, okay. You know that
bleeding.
in periambulary, the color will not be typically melanic. It is described as something else.
Silvery color stools.
Okay, that means already there is pale stools on top of which when melena comes, the color doesn't become black, it becomes shiny silvery. Like, okay. There is no melena.
Is there any exertional dyspnea?
No.
So this
Why did
question,
you ask that question?
so this Viva question is often asked, how would you know that the fatigue the patient has is due to a GI bleed or is it due to lack of appetite and loss of weight? How would you differentiate the two, fatigue? Not the blood loss vis-a-vis just lack of intake.
And in the clinical history, ma'am, usually the uh, uh, loss of appetite and loss of decreased food intake will start initially, then followed by fatigue, ma'am. But in this case, this fatigue is started before the initiation of the.
So you know that it is GI bleed. Very simple question.
So,
They can have blackout, they'll have giddiness, they'll have postural differences, they'll have
Yes,
palpitation. All this will give a clue. So if there's an occult blood loss, this question again is a Viva question. In a
Yes,
patient with history of fatigue, would you like to know whether it is just part of the illness, systemic illness, or is it due to blood loss? So that is important. What's your
Okay.
comment on that reddish skin rash? What's your response to that on face, limbs, and trunk for the first 3 days?
First 3 days, that's why, ma'am, because if is associated with any viral illness, viral prodrome is a part of rashes will be the part of viral
Which
prodrome.
virus?
If any like hepatitis A, hepatitis E also causes transient rash reaction.
A and E will never cause. It's more of a B, no? The arthralgia, serum sickness like presentation is more due to B.
Okay,
A and E is just simple anorexia, nausea, vomiting. This question is again asked. How will you differentiate AE from B? So if you have arthralgia, skin rash, joint pain, all these and all would be related more to B, whereas A and E usually do not have. But there's a history of indigenous drug treatment. So do you want to attach importance to that and that skin rash? That's also a possibility, you know, hypersensitivity reaction.
Yes, sir.
So you have to keep that in mind. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay, next is past history. What else you will specifically ask for in the past history?
Sir, past history in this case, I will specifically ask any history of recurrent jaundice before. Before this episode, is there any previous history of jaundice?
What is in your mind?
Sir?
What do you want? What do you want to find out by asking for a previous history of jaundice? Is it a random question or is it you're asking this question with a specific purpose?
Sir, specific purpose, sir. If sometimes if it's some indirect hyperbilirubinemia, there is a chance of getting intermittent.
But this patient has cholestatic symptoms, jaundice and pruritus. At least skin rashes are there, therefore we do not know. But this is a recent onset, no? Do you have such sort of a history? In indirect hyperbilirubinemia, the most common is Gilbert syndrome. Next is hemolytic disease. Do you have such a history? In this particular entity, where you have got a 47-year-old female with a 4 weeks history of fatigue, 2 weeks history of jaundice, and the symptoms of pruritus.
So I'll ask specifically about any history of biliary colic, sir.
Okay, pain abdomen in the past.
There's no
pain abdomen, not persistent more than 6 hours. Usually resolves within 6 hours. Is there any history? I will ask.
Any history of pain abdomen, which is suggestive of biliary disease or even pancreatic disease in the past? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any history of any
surgery important?
Ma'am?
History of surgery.
Yes, ma'am. History of surgery is important, ma'am. Like any cholecystectomy in the previous history of any cholecystectomy.
What cholecystectomy in relation to what? What is it that why are you asking for cholecystectomy?
Like if it's cholecystitis and secondary to
surgery, complicated surgery, no? Then the patient,
yes, ma'am.
Surgery, then this is also a possibility. Okay, fine. Okay, can we just move on?
Yeah, 1 second. I have some local issues.
Past history, she is a known case of hypertension, was on losartan, poorly controlled. Treating physician added dihydrogen 1 month ago. Type 2 diabetes melts on metformin, last 10 years, fairly controlled. Patient had taken some medicines for postmenopausal symptoms for about 3 months, 2 years earlier. Any other relevant details to be asked?
I think we've already discussed that, no? So you want
Yeah.
to ask history of surgery, you want to ask history of any long-term medication, any family history of what family history would you ask? That will be in the family history. Okay, we move on. Okay, personal history.
Personal history, appetite is mildly reduced, bowel and bladder habits normal, menopause 2 years ago, recent sleep disturbed due to pruritus. Mixed diet, 100 kilocalories is taking, drinks well water, not boiled. Took special health drink of multiple fruit juices and leaves, purchased online for 4 weeks prior to the onset of illness. Able to do normal household activities without difficulty until this illness. So there is a consumption of
One second, just one small comment here. Normally, what I always say, you know, for personal history, what I say is something very personal to the patient. You know, say if it's a male, then alcohol, smoking is something very personal to the patient, or high risk behavior. So I'd always prefer that this appetite and bowel, bladder, and all usually moves on into the present history. Okay, because it's not personal to the, it is common for everyone. The appetite, the bowel, bladder habits are all common to everyone. Okay, so I'd always prefer that. The other important thing that I would like to just stress before we move on in the history, just divide it into 3 or 4 parts. You know, the first part will be expansion of the chief complaints. Okay, at the end of the completion of the chief complaints, you give the global physical assessment scale. That is important. Okay. That will tell you that overall, during this 2 weeks period or 1 month period, the overall global physical assessment scale was this, and her WHO performance scale was this. So that takes charge of that. That is number 2. So A will be history expansion. Number 2 would be mention about the physical assessment scale. Number 3 would be just mention about that during this course of illness, patient has not been investigated or has been investigated and has had some basic lab tests, details of which are not known or known. Especially if you go to tertiary reference centers, if you go to high centers like say CMC, Vellore and all, the patient will say that I'm a case of ulcerative colitis, which means that it's already a known case. Okay, so divide the history as expansion of the chief complaints, move on to the physical assessment, the global physical assessment scale or WHO performance scale, and then mention about the treatment history. And before you go to the past, just see whether that particular complaints that the patient has any effect, finish off the luminal, like appetite, loss of weight, loss of appetite, bowel movements, and bladder movements. So that tells you that the system is normal. And then see, just have an overall view. Okay, can this patient have something in the CNS? So should I ask for history of altered sensorium? Maybe yes, maybe no. Should I ask for any breathlessness in the respiratory system or palpitation for cardiovascular? Just see whether anything is required for that particular case. Go through a complete survey in your mind. Okay, and then you come down to the skeletal system. And then see, should I ask for history of joint pain? Is it autoimmune? And therefore, should I ask for joint pain? So always, before you go to the past history, divide your history into chief complaint expansion, global physical assessment scale, finish off an overall survey of all the other systems, and then 4th part will be investigations. 5th part, most important, nutrition, intake. If someone is a long-standing history, you're likely to have, a lack of intake, and therefore just see that. Like, for instance, a case of diarrhea, you have to ask for history of cheilitis, glossitis. So have a paragraph on nutrition, then go to the investigations and treatment, and then go to the past. So your history taking should take about 5 to 7 minutes and cover up all these aspects before you move to the past and family history. Okay. So family history, she's married. There's no history of liver disease in the family. Okay. Next, what? That's all we have. And should we summarize now? Okay.
Now the summary of my history. 45-year-old female presented with jaundice, generalized weakness since 4 weeks, followed by jaundice since 2 weeks associated with generalized pruritus, ma'am. And there is no history suggestive of any prodromal symptoms. And there is a history of intake of complementary and alternative medication, but she is not improving with the above medication.
Supposing I were to summarize, I'll just say 47-year-old lady, asymptomatic until first week of April, started with history of fatigue, with onset of jaundice lasting for 2 weeks with cholestatic symptoms of pruritus and passage of pale stool, in absence of abdominal pain, fever with chills and rigors. This is the way you would expand. And with a significant history of alternative system of medicine that has been taken much later, with no morbidity of hypertension. That's all. Don't keep repeating the entire history again and again.
Okay.
Okay. And in absence, as rightly said, absence of prodromal symptoms. Okay.
Okay.
So, what's your syndromic diagnosis?
My syndromic diagnosis: acute intrahepatic cholestatic jaundice.
The syndromic diagnosis is cholestatic jaundice. No, that is broad syndromic is cholestatic jaundice. In that, you will say, I would like to discuss intrahepatic versus extrahepatic. Always remember, any cholestatic jaundice examiner will expect you to discuss both intrahepatic and extrahepatic. And then say, with comorbidity of hypertension and no other complications with a performance scale of T. So there are 5 components to the syndromic diagnosis. Now, which one do you like to offer, intrahepatic or extrahepatic, and why?
Ma'am, I want to keep it in intrahepatic, ma'am, because of there is no abdominal pain and age is less than 50 years, and there is a history suggestive of consumption of complementary and alternative medicine, and there is a initial.
What is the cutoff for 50 years, less than 50 and more than 50 abdominal pain? I didn't understand.
Ma'am, just because of periampullary carcinoma or pancreatic carcinoma usually present in.
And then not asking what percentage. Don't fall into that trap. Don't bring in all this.
Okay, ma'am.
Nothing prevents a person at the age of 25, 30 getting a periampullary carcinoma. Okay, don't bring in all that. So you say the reasons why I considered intrahepatic are: number 1, onset of fatigue. There is history of cholestatic jaundice with a history of complementary medicine, in absence of abdominal pain and fever. But there is history of rash, indicating it's likely to be intrahepatic. Can it be extrahepatic?
Ma'am?
Can it be extrahepatic?
Extrahepatic only. One thing is same thing, ma'am. Again, only female and.
No, don't bring in all that. What are the points for extrahepatic? For extrahepatic, you say it's a sudden onset. Usually, most of them are sudden onset, progressive in nature, and it could still be the initial 2 weeks that you're seeing. You cannot differentiate. Pruritus is already set in. Okay. The absence of significant colicky abdominal pain does not exclude the possibility, but less chances are that it could be extrahepatic. That's all you have to discuss. Okay. And Manvis, anything else that you'd like to discuss? And now tell what's the etiology.
Etiology.
Etiology secondary, more probably secondary to the drug-induced liver or viral hepatitis, ma'am, because of prodromal symptoms. And other.
Doctor, just listen. There's a fatigue. The fatigue is lasting for 1 month, and then there's jaundice and pruritus, and complementary system of medicine is towards the end. It's not at the onset, if I'm right.
Yes, ma'am.
When was a drug CAM given? It was taken?
Ma'am, in the personal history, she taken some green.
I think I will intervene. The complementary medicine which she has taken is only after the onset of jaundice.
Jaundice, exactly.
But she has taken some health drinks of fruits and some leaves and all, which was purchased online. The details of which are not known, but she has taken it for 1 month prior to the illness. We do not have the details. And the only other thing is addition of dry hydroxyzine by the treating doctor about 2 months ago.
What was it? Last point?
The hypertension was not controlled with the losartan. So the treating physician added dry hydroxyzine along with the other medications. And then she was on metformin since long.
Fine. So the possibilities are number one, drug-induced liver injury. Number one. Number two.
Hepatitis, viral hepatitis, ma'am. Hepatitis B more likely. Third one will be the because of
What reactivation? Huh? What do you think it is B?
Why did you say hepatitis B?
Why did you say B?
Because of jaundice and prodromal symptoms are rash developed that.
So do you think that she had developed acute hepatitis B and cholestasis?
No. Acute reactivation of chronic hepatitis B, sir.
Okay, but does she have any risk factor?
Sir, no, sir.
Did she have any surgery?
LSCS happened 19 years, only that one, sir, and otherwise no other risk factors, sir. Only
Is
LSCS
surgery a risk factor?
Sir, if during LSCS, if any blood transfusion done, that will be the risk factor, sir.
Okay, that we do not know that she had received blood transfusion.
What is your differential? Very important differential.
And then because of fatigue followed by jaundice and cholestasis, even I want to rule out primary biliary cholangitis and other autoimmune liver disease also, ma'am.
Don't just say other autoimmune and something like that. Be very definite, doctor. This is what is expected in exam. Number one, you said was drug-induced liver injury. Number one. Number two, you said reactivation hepatitis B. Number three,
primary biliary cholangitis.
Just only it is just PBC. That's all. Primary biliary cholangitis. Any other?
Fourth one, primary sclerosing cholangitis. Autoimmune hepatitis is the fifth one, ma'am.
Autoimmune hepatitis, how often you get cholestatic symptoms?
When
the classic autoimmune disease.
Get an autoimmune hepatitis with cholangitis or with cholestasis. Overlap, yeah? You have to consider overlap.
Yeah,
overlap.
You must consider overlap, not
Yes,
straightforward
overlap.
standard autoimmune hepatitis.
And it is not straightforward PSC, it is not straightforward PBC either. Most likely it has to only an overlap if you get that combination, no? When you have serum sickness-like presentation, some skin rashes are there, there is cholestasis, and there's pruritus. So it's like it could be, and there's onset with fatigue. So if it is fatigue with this, it could be a PBC with an overlap. That is possible.
Okay.
And that could be, can it be autoimmune induced, drug-induced autoimmune hepatitis? That is an important differential.
Yeah, that also one possible, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You not know that also. That is an important differential. Drug-induced autoimmune hepatitis is also present like this. You have autoimmune-like picture and precipitated by CAM, alternative system of medicine.
Okay.
Okay, so these will be a differential. So therefore, but I think extrahepatic you can almost consider not likely, unlikely. It is unlikely to be primary PSC or a PBC. Okay, this is not the presentation. Any questions from the students who would like to ask? You can unmute and quickly ask one or two questions. Okay, there are no questions. Okay, then, so what are the things you look for on examination?
Ma'am, first in the general examination, I will look for is there any.
Would you like to consider Wilson's disease? Just thinking of all the diseases. Can it be Wilson?
Ma'am, Wilson, there is no family history, ma'am. But possible, ma'am. Wilson.
That's not the way you answer, no? Family history, what percentage? This is the way the questions will ask.
Yes, ma'am.
Considering a clinical presentation, will you consider Wilson's disease? That is the question.
In this clinical presentation, more unlikely, sir, Wilson's disease.
Why?
Usually, Wilson's will present either acute liver failure, chronic hepatitis, or acute and chronic. This one, chronic hepatitis, acute hepatitis, or acute liver failure, ma'am. With cholestatic features, intrahepatic cholestasis is very unlikely.
What is that?
It is age of onset.
Most important is age of onset, number one. Number two, if they can have cholestatic if they have associated gallstones. No? Hemolysis is known in Wilson's disease. So they can always have gallstones, they can have. Only thing then you have pain and cholangitis, which is not there. So age, etc., does not fit in with Wilson's. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So examination, what all the things you look for?
Ma'am, examination, is there any stigma for any first I'll see, is there any pallor, ma'am? Any edema, lymphadenopathy? Um, then I will look for is
Systematically,
there any
doctor, just keep in your mind from top down. What are the, as you examine the case, what are the things that you look for? You look for icterus. You
icterus,
look
pallor,
for
bite,
any polystatic ring. Pallor cannot be picked up in presence of deep jaundice, so don't comment on pallor except for the pharmacresis. Number
yes,
3.
ma'am.
Then what else would you look for? Then you look for the lymph nodes. Then you look for the swelling of the lower limbs. She's postmenopausal, so all of the signs of liver cell failure are less likely. And vitals are important. First, you look at the vitals, and then also please look for the do a nutritional assessment. You look for the BMI and do a quick assessment of the sarcopenia index, so that you're very certain that nutrition is maintained and she's otherwise all right. Do not miss on the nutritional assessment. This time, in the center at Bangalore, they have a lot of questions on frailty and sarcopenia. In every case, almost every case, they keep discussing this. Because in the management, the nutrition becomes important. And we
Okay.
understood. So every patient, just see that you do a good nutritional assessment for all cases. That's why I said have a paragraph of nutrition even in the history taking, and also bring in the nutrition assessment in your clinical examination.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And in long-standing cholestasis, you have to look for xanthomas, xanthelasmas, long-standing. I'm not talking in this case. And also look for a cholestatic ring. I'm not talking in this case. If in patient with cholestasis, these are the things that you look for. Other findings that you look for. All right. So
Okay.
can we move on?
On physical examination, weight 54 kilos, ma'am, and BMI 20.2, pulse rate 66 beats per minute, blood pressure 146 by 94 millimeter of mercury, icterus present on eyes and skin, multiple scratch marks over extremities and trunk, fingernail shiny, no clubbing, no edema, no lymph nodes, no spider navy, no rashes, ma'am. Other features already.
Okay, that we have already discussed.
Next.
Okay. In the examination of abdomen, what all things you specifically look for to differentiate between intra and extrahepatic?
First thing I'll see, is there any hepatomegaly or not, sir? Any palpable gallbladder?
So you look for
And
hepatomegaly, you look for a splenomegaly, you look
hepatomegaly.
for a spleen, and you look for a gallbladder which is palpable or not palpable. Okay. What will you look in the liver in this patient?
Sorry, ma'am.
What do you expect the liver to be in this patient? As you examine, what do you think the liver would be in this patient?
Liver would be in this patient much enlarged, ma'am.
Maybe enlarged, yes. It could be enlarged, it could be
And
firm, margins, you expect it to be regular.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And surface is likely to be smooth. And you expect an expanded liver span. See, as you're examining, you should know what you're looking for. Otherwise, everything will be missed if your mind does not think what you're looking for. Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Liver is palpable 2 centimeters, span is 14 centimeters, everything else is normal.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Okay.
I think in chronic pharyngeal disease of extended duration, some mental examination also should be done.
Yeah, very mental. Yeah.
Because that may be missed completely.
Yeah.
So diagnosis after physical examination, I'll still keep the same diagnosis. Cholestatic jaundice, probably intrahepatic.
We discussed this. We've discussed this. Okay.
Okay. So you stick on to intrahepatic cholestasis. Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
We don't have any clues to make further diagnosis. Okay, how will you investigate?
Sir,
Apart from routine test, what will you do?
Sir, apart from the routine, sir.
Yeah, that is done for everyone, no? In this particular case.
Sir, in this particular case, first I'll do the
baseline. You'll ask for a baseline investigations, which will include what are the things you'll ask for baseline.
Baseline investigation, it will include the complete blood count. In complete blood count, I want to check the hemoglobin, MCV, and platelet count and total counts, ma'am.
Okay.
And LFT with total.
And eosinophil count. No, you may want an absolute eosinophil count as well because there was some rash and all that. Okay, then.
Yes, ma'am. So and LFT PT-INR, ma'am.
It's a hypertensive, so you need a creatinine. You
Creatinine,
need
sodium, potassium.
plus serum electrolyte. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So
And in this case, hemoglobin is 12.6, ma'am. Total count 11,300. And
Doctor, what do you expect in the liver biochemistry?
Liver biochemistry, I expect to increase direct hyperbilirubinemia, ma'am.
Conjugated?
Yeah, conjugated hyperbilirubinemia.
What do you expect the enzymes to be? Roughly how many times?
Roughly.
You had two differentials, reactivation and drug-induced liver injury as your two important differentials.
Yes, ma'am.
And 1 minute, and autoimmune. Not just in what LFT will be there in all these three.
All these things.
In reactivation, what do you expect the AST-LT to be?
AST-LT to be up to more than thousands, ma'am. AST-LT more than thousands, and the alkaline phosphatase only up to 3 times normal.
Okay, and if it is drug-induced liver injury or autoimmune hepatitis?
Drug-induced liver injury, AST-LT more than 5 times normal, ma'am. But alkaline phosphatase
range, you will expect how much?
Around the 300, 200 to 300 range.
And what will be the alkaline phosphatase?
Alkaline phosphatase in this patient also it will be 3 times more than normal, ma'am. Like depends upon the local normal lab value. So more than 3 times.
Importance of albumin and globulin?
It will maintain the AG ratio.
No, you have 3 differentials. So what are you
looking? So if hyperglobulinemia is there, that will be more towards the primary biliary or primary sclerosing or overlap syndromes, ma'am.
Basically, that should be in your mind. So these are the things. So when you see the report, this is what you're expecting, okay? And based on this, you can calculate the ratio, no, for your drug-induced liver injury, whether it's polystatic, mixed, or hepatocellular.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you need to differentiate, no, whether it's mixed, hepatocellular, or is it polystatic. So you need that alkaline phosphatase as well as the enzyme elevations. So what do we have here?
Here total bilirubin is 16, ma'am. AST-LT.
Fasting blood sugar is 124. You think that's abnormal, fasting blood sugar?
124, impaired fasting blood sugar, ma'am.
So keep a watch on that. So you need an HbA1c, okay?
Okay, ma'am.
And 12%. Note that. See, eosinophil is 12%.
Yes, ma'am. Eosinophil 12. That also elevated, ma'am.
Elevated, yeah. Then bilirubin.
ESR also 62, mildly elevated, and bilirubin is total bilirubin 16 and conjugated bilirubin 9.8, ma'am. AST is 131 and 161. So the 4 times and 5 times elevation than normal, ma'am. ALT more than AST, ma'am.
Yeah. Slightly.
And
alkaline phosphatase is elevated, again suggesting polystasis.
Yes, ma'am.
And what about the albumin globulin?
Albumin is 3.3 and globulin 3.6, ma'am. Globulin also elevated, ma'am. It's
okay.
more than.
So now, what's your interpretation of this? What do you think the patient is suffering from? Most probably intrahepatic cellular, no?
Yes, ma'am. Intrahepatic cholestasis.
It may be a mixed. It's a mixed. It is actually mixed. You have the cutoff less than 2, more than 2 to 5, and more than 5. So gamma GT is missing here. So, do we have any information on gamma GT?
No, I don't have.
Okay. So gamma GT is important because it will give you a clue to the polystasis. Okay. Now what will be your next investigation? So based on this, it is less likely to be viral hepatitis. It's again more towards polystatic drug-induced liver injury possibility, and you have to keep the globulin. So what next investigation will be asked?
Ma'am, next investigation I want to do the ANA screening IF, ma'am, and then I want to do AMA M2.
So before that, what's the first thing you'll ask? You'll ask for serum IgG.
Yes, ma'am.
First, you'll ask for immunoglobulin. So you ask for immunoglobulin first, and then do all the other AIH profile, autoimmune hepatitis profile. Okay.
And simultaneously, I want to do.
Yes, there it is. ANA was 1.36 positive.
Yes, ma'am.
negative.
Smooth muscle and antimatter LKM, LSA, anti-double-strand DNA negative, ma'am. IgG levels 1250 milligram per deciliter and ferritin is 1044 nanogram per ml. So immunoglobulin levels were elevated, ma'am.
Yeah. So there's some component of an autoimmune. Not most of the markers are negative. ANA alone is positive. So what else should we do now after this? So it's more like an autoimmune, no? Something, maybe an overlap possibility. That's what I would consider. So what will be the next investigation of choice?
Ma'am, next investigation I'll do simultaneously with ultrasound abdomen along with this investigation.
Yeah.
And so this, ma'am, sorry, ma'am.
What is it showing?
What does this show?
Ma'am, this ultrasound abdomen shows there is a distended gallbladder with an irregular wall, ma'am, with some hyper enhancement seen in the body of the.
What is characteristic?
Hyperechoic lesions, no?
What is characteristic behind the?
What is this?
Yeah, that one.
What is this? What is this known as class? You have
shadow,
some hyperechoic.
Shadows,
Pardon?
Hyperechoic lesions with shadows.
Yeah, acoustic shadowing.
Acoustic
shadow.
So what is the classic of?
Gallbladder stones, sir.
Gallbladder stones. And the lower panel, the arrow shows there are three spaces. Which are those? This is ultrasound of the liver.
Sir, this is porta hepaticus, sir. Right and left hepatic duct with portal vein.
This is looking for bile duct. This is CBD is anterior, portal vein, and usually you will also get a cut of inferior vena cava also. This is that particular view. So according to the ultrasound, the CBD is 6 millimeter.
Yes, sir. That means it's not dilated, sir.
No, good. Yeah, good.
But there are gallstones. Do you want to change your diagnosis now?
No, sir. Asymptomatic gallstone will be the possibility, sir. But without any features of IHBRD dilated CBD, I'll stick to my diagnosis, sir.
Okay, good. Don't jump and change your diagnosis because this patient had no clinical features of extrahepatic cholestasis, no pain, no IHBRD, nothing. Okay.
So what should, any other investigations you want or you're comfortable?
Why the ferritin is done and first and foremost, should ferritin be done in this case?
Sir, ferritin usually not indicated in this case, sir. But 1044 values, we need to basically see first the transferrin saturation. So that iron and TIBC will be
so
first
that
indicated.
Is 47%.
Sir?
This is
47.
This is more like an acute phase reactive, no? Ferritin.
Yes, sir.
So if you go and do ferritin for all acute hepatitis like picture, you will find an elevated value and then you will land into confusion. You have to do transferrin saturation and other things.
Yeah.
Okay. Only when it is strongly suspected, you go and do. Okay. So how will you proceed further? How will you manage?
You want any more investigations? You are satisfied? And
no, ma'am. Still, my diagnosis. So just now I will proceed with liver biopsy, ma'am. I'll see a PTINR. If PTINR normal and ultra.
I think it was 1.2. INR is 1.2. Why do you want to do biopsy?
By the way, after the investigation, what is your diagnosis? Is it autoimmune hepatitis? Straightforward?
No, sir, it's not straightforward autoimmune hepatitis because all conventional autoimmune markers came negative, only ANA plus. So to confirm the diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis, I want to do the liver biopsy to start.
For autoimmune and also for drug-induced liver injury. No? So both ways get stuck. So therefore, I also agree with you that I think we should have a liver biopsy because management would be different between the two.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but patient was not very keen to have liver biopsy.
And can it be ANA negative PBC or one overlap?
No, yes, ma'am. Possible, ma'am.
Yeah, that about 10 to 20% maybe AMA negative. No? You can have an AMA negative PBC. So with an overlap. So when will you consider overlap with a PBC? If you have alpha gamma GT elevation and you have an ALT AST, then you start considering a overlap. And
overlapping.
I think liver biopsy is essentially, especially in those situations, so that if it is PBC, then you know what the diagnosis is, the treatment changes, and if it is drug induced, then again you can check out what it is. At this stage, please read Hy's law. Last time also we discussed what is R factor. Read all the how you classify the mixed cholestatic and cholestatic mixed and hepatocellular jaundice in drug-induced liver injury, common drugs that cause. Okay. So what do we have? This is MRCP.
MRCP we have done, of course, that obviously not that much strongly indicated. That was normal. And this is the follow-up LFT.
How would you manage the patient? What would you do with this patient? Level 1, what would you do?
Ma'am, level 1, I'll give the hepatoprotective drugs, ma'am, and advise her.
Just stop all medications except the antihypertensives, no?
Yes, ma'am.
First
And
is already taking CAM. She's already on that fruit juice and all that. So first is stop all the medications. And then what will be your next level 2? What will be your next? The first is stop the medications other than antihypertensives and ensure that she's not a diabetic. And then therefore have a diabetic diet control. Okay. Then? And
then I'll give antioxidants and hepatoprotective drugs, ma'am.
What will you give? What's your prescription?
What are those drugs?
What will be your prescription? Just tell your prescription.
Orthodeoxycholic acid 300 mg twice daily, ma'am, and NSTL 600 mg twice daily, ma'am.
How do you get the 300 milligram twice a day? What is that 300 milligram twice a day? How do you give a...
Sorry, 15 milligram per kg body weight, ma'am.
So, how much
okay, this is for cholestasis or for DILI which you are giving?
Sir, this is basically I'm giving for cholestasis, sir, because of she's not willing for liver biopsy, so that trial of orthodeoxycholic it is a hepatoprotective, like non-toxic bile acid, so it will promote the cholestasis. So basically, I'm giving for.
Is there any specific medication for drug-induced liver disease? In this case, can you give any specific medicine? UDCA we give in most of the cholestatic jaundice, no?
Yes, sir.
So you said about NAC.
NSTL.
What's the role of NAC in non-paracetamol drug-induced liver disease?
Yes, sir, it acts as an antioxidant. So, but other non-paracetamol actually.
Okay, it was classically, it is classically given for paracetamol, but now increasingly this drug is given for other forms of drug-induced liver injury. Okay, that is increasingly being given, and that's probably a recommendation. Only we don't have any hard evidence to do that, but even DILI experts seem to be doing it. Okay, they also recommend. So the treating physician actually decided to put her on steroids, and she was put on 20 milligram of prednisolone when ANA was positive, and that is the result afterwards. Do you think it is the effect of drug or effect of withdrawal of the drug? It could be both.
Even
washout phenomenon of a steroid, but more likely it's a natural history of the disease, no? That steroid is active like a placebo. So the last bit was, yes, there was a question. Actually, patient is actually diabetic, no? Patients on metformin. So
yes, ma'am.
A question on the chat box. So can it be NASH related?
Ma'am, in the LFT it's not showing AST, ALT is more than AST, ma'am. So it's
that is, you have to consider background of NASH because there's a metabolic, 2 components are there, no? Hypertension is there.
Yes, and
she's also got a diabetic state. The BMI is normal. So just consider that we don't miss a NASH, underlying NASH in this patient, okay?
Okay.
Any questions from the audience? Is there any question in the chat box?
Many. I have put up certain questions which you can just scan and then try to answer, because sometimes during the discussion you may get about what are the types of cholestasis histologically, because when you do liver biopsy, those with the bland cholestasis, those with the lobular inflammation, those with the bile ductal changes, and etc. And then for cholestasis, the duration of chronic disease is 3 months, not 6 months. It was earlier 6 months, it has been reduced to 3 months. So chronic cholestasis drug induced is beyond 3 months. acute cholestasis is less than 3 months. Of course, they may ask you about PFIC and all the other things. Does autoimmune hepatitis of drug-induced differ from the classic AIH in any way?
It's a common question, yeah. The eosinophil counts will be high. Liver biopsy will also show
Eosinophils.
eosinophils in the porta.
Okay. And what is Rett syndrome?
We said
Drug reaction, eosinophilia.
drug-related eosinophilic skin.
Yeah, when Rett syndrome is associated with hepatotoxicity, potential hepatotoxicity, almost sure. That is one thing. If you have an acute liver injury plus Rett syndrome, like in this patient had some skin lesions, your suspicion has to be very high. And autoimmune hepatitis usually responds much favorably with steroids and does not recur when steroid is stopped. The classic autoimmune disease, if you stop the steroid, there is a very high chance of recurrence, which really doesn't happen. That is because the offending agent is identified and offending drug or other toxic agent is stopped. Okay, so these things you should know. And we searched up the literature and found out that actually the drug hydralazine, which was added, which was capable of producing all these things. Hydralazine is notorious to produce SLE-like manifestation and various types of hepatitis. Only few cases are reported in the world literature, but dihydroxyzine is known to produce various types of hepatitis, cholestasis, SLE-like manifestation. So many things are there. Okay, so when you have a person with acute liver injury, I think DILI always have to be kept in the mind. Okay, that is, I think, the learning point. Now read about DILI, because DILI is not that very well given in your Schlesinger. I think you have to read up other reviews. That is what I feel.
Yeah, and there's other important thing is that history of blood transfusion, tattooing, travel history is all important, okay, in your history taking. Something people from North are very fond of, you know, that tattooing is something that they always expect you to speak on. As well as, of course, transfusions, we mentioned about the LSCS, and travel history for hepatitis E and A, okay?
One question, Dr. Jagdish. How often you don't get a positive risk factor in a patient with confirmed hepatitis B? Because we always expect, but literature says that in around 40% of cases, the risk factor may not be obvious.
Yeah.
It could be intrafamilial spread also. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll move on to the next case.
Good presentation. You did well. Good.
You've done well. Okay. Next is
Thank
Dr. Santosh.
Yes, sir.
You are ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
62-year-old male patient from Calicut, carpenter by profession. History is reliable. Upper abdominal pain from 4 weeks, jaundice from 3 weeks, and pruritus into 2 weeks. Loss of weight into 2 months.
Loss of appetite.
Loss of appetite into 2 months. So
like the previous case, I will elicit history.
Yes, sir. With this given patient as a sudden onset, patient, I want to know the onset of pain, progression of pain, and location of the pain, and there is any exacerbation or relieving factor with the position, food, or bowel habits. And meanwhile, I want to look for whether there is any the pain abdomen associated with the jaundice.
1 minute. Why did you ask for bowel habit?
Madam?
Why did you
whether
ask
there is any features of obstruction, intestinal
abdomen?
obstruction, which is causing infiltration, madam. Gastric outlet obstruction.
Come on, yeah. This is very kind of a problem. Upper abdominal pain, gastric outlet obstruction in this patient. And you said bowel pattern. Be very careful when asking all these questions.
Okay. You said abdominal pain. What all things were in your mind when you said you will elaborate on the abdominal pain in a patient with jaundice with pruritus?
I want to see the location of the pain abdomen and the character of the pain abdomen, and there is any radiation.
Right upper quadrant. This is the right upper quadrant.
Right upper quadrant. I would want to look for a character of the pain abdomen, and if there is any colicky nature and exacerbated by the food habit.
Okay. So what all diseases are in your mind? Just narrate. So,
one
jaundice with pain.
GB pathology with calculi or malignant this one, or patient might have
GB pathology, gallbladder calculi and carcinoma of the gallbladder.
Carcinoma gallbladder.
Next.
And it can and it can be cholangitis with choledocholitis and cholangitis, that's second possibility. And even pancreatic pathology is also possible.
What pathology?
Pancreatic, chronic pancreatitis, or it can be pancreatic adenocarcinomas.
Chronic pancreatitis with obstructive jaundice. How does it happen? How does chronic pancreatitis produce obstructive jaundice?
It can cause a stricture, sir, or it can cause even a malignancy.
Okay, so malignancy. So, okay, can you have a carcinoma pancreas without chronic pancreatitis?
Carcinoma, yes, sir, it can happen, sir.
Okay, so carcinoma pancreas without a background history of chronic pancreatitis.
And can this be intrahepatic?
Abdominal pain.
Why are you considering extrahepatic? I say this is all intrahepatic.
One patient has a predominant pain from 4 weeks. That was a predominant first onset.
What are the intrahepatic causes of upper abdominal pain, jaundice, and pruritus?
Viral hepatitis can cause, madam. Perihepatitis that can cause capsular distension and cause pain. And even it can, Budd-Chiari syndrome, sudden acute onset of Budd-Chiari syndrome can cause pain, abdomen, jaundice, and...
What are the other common causes of upper abdominal pain, jaundice, and pruritus?
Drug-induced liver injury.
Other causes? Can it be tumor? Can it be HCC?
Yes, madam. Even tumors which can cause pain, abdomen, and pruritus possible.
What are the tumors?
Even HCC, cholangiocarcinoma. HCC rarely can present with obstruction. Cholangiocarcinoma is most likely, madam.
Not hepatocellular carcinoma. Can hepatocellular carcinoma present like this? Jaundice and pruritus?
Very rarely it can have a pruritus features, but most likely, most commonly cholangiocarcinoma. More likely.
How often do you see cholangiocarcinomas? What proportion of patients are cholangiocarcinoma? Can it be hepatocellular carcinoma with nodes at the porta, invading the CBD? This particular patient, always remember, doctor, always any patient with cholestatic jaundice,
okay,
you have to discuss both intrahepatic causes and extrahepatic causes. Do not get skewed towards only one of the two. You have to say that my patient has got cholestatic jaundice syndromic diagnosis as you move along, and then say my particular patient I would like to consider both intra and extrahepatic, but I'll consider extrahepatic rather than intrahepatic. Actually, there's nothing in this patient to say it is extrahepatic.
Okay, madam.
Because your patient, nothing is in this particular patient to say. So, in fact, if you start discussing intrahepatic, they'll be more happy. And then say, however, extrahepatic causes cannot be excluded because the age of the patient is 62-year-old. There is loss of appetite. There is symptoms suggestive of pruritus and features of cholestasis. Okay. And then, depending on the type of abdominal pain, now read abdominal pain. Discuss.
Upper abdominal pain, insidious in onset, felt more towards the epigastrium, dull aching, mild pain to begin with, last for 1 to 2 hours, with no specific relation with the food intake or activity. Pain becomes more severe since last 2 weeks, lasting for many hours, requiring painkillers on and off. Mostly oral tablets, sometimes injection also. Jaundice insidious onset without fever, nausea and vomiting, or as prodromes, gradually increasing. No history of any fluctuations in depth of jaundice. Generalized pruritus, insidious onset, and now present during day and night. No associated skin rashes. Loss of appetite since 2 months. Weight loss of 5 kgs over last 2 months. No history of fever, no fever or chills. No change in color of stools. Any further?
So just see in this, if you see the sequence of events, the patient actually has anorexia and weight loss for 2 months, and then the jaundice and pruritus and abdominal pain. Okay, so whatever pathology you're discussing is a neoplastic. In neoplastic, you have to consider intrahepatic versus extrahepatic. That's all you have to discuss. It's a dull continuous pain which indicates that the liver is enlarged, either due to tumor or it is just a dull ache. But the pain is epigastrium is more of a dull ache. Okay.
Yes.
But for the last 2 weeks, it is more severe. So it can still be hepatocellular carcinoma, which is increased in size. Nothing prevents it. Okay. Then comes the second differential of gallbladder cancer. Then hilar will not present with pain, and the last will be carcinoid, because the pain is significant. So the pain history is most important. If it is more of a pain arising from the liver, it will be a dull, continuous ache. Whereas if it is a carcinoma of pancreas, it will be more of a discomfort. And that pain is more of a pancreatic pain. So see that when you're taking the history of pain, see that you get some history to suggest, if supposing on examination you find a palpable gallbladder, then move, direct your history towards the pancreatic pain. You can always, no examiner is going to get up and ask what type of pain you have. But supposing gallbladder is not palpable and you find there's just a large liver with a smooth surface, then that means you are needing more of extrahepatic and build up your history towards that. On the other hand, you find that the liver is hard, then move the history towards a pain that is more towards the right hypochondrium and bring in the history to suggest it's more of a liver pathology. That is the art of presentation from the history, because you're on the other side where you have already examined the case. So you can take that trump card. If it is predominantly hard liver, build up your history towards secondaries, but still you can bring up the history towards the liver. On the other hand, if you find gallbladder is palpable, then the pain is more of a pancreatic pain. So just remember that, okay? And it is plastic because of the loss of weight and appetite for a period of 2 months, okay?
Yes.
Dr. Varghese, anything else?
Yeah, the pain, I think something more should have been asked.
Yeah.
Like a radiation of the pain, whether there is any pancreatic posturing and other things. So some more details should have been read. Should have been there. Okay.
Okay, sir. Past illness, diabetes mellitus from 15 years, was on OHA, now poorly controlled, attributed due to irregular intake of medicine. Had attended local hospital with severe tiredness 2 months ago, found to have high blood sugar and advised insulin, but patient preferred tablets. No other significant past history. What all illness will you ask ask specifically? This one I would, there is a recent change in diabetic control that can be even attributed to one medicine. Other one, probably there is a recent, a patient has a neoplastic etiology. Extrahepatic pancreatic neoplasm is one of the possibilities where we have to consider. And I would want to previously, whether patient had similar history of jaundice or pain abdomen previously, I would want to ask to look for if the patient had any features of pancreatitis or past history of any pancreatitis, which I want to ask. Whether patient had a past history of any pancreatitis which has predisposed to malignancy. I would want to think of.
Chronicity, whether patient is on treatment for hepatitis B.
Yes, madam.
The patient has got decompensation.
Yes, madam.
Consider intrahepatic as well as HCC as an important differential. So you have to ask for history of all the details for a liver cell failure. You have to be 100% sure that you're not missing a pathology arising from the liver. It is cirrhotic, and the patient is now developed a HCC. That is very important. So these are the things that you would ask, maybe even in the present, or bring in the past. The patient is not a known case of chronic liver disease. Then automatically, and the patient has not been on any long-term medication.
Okay, madam.
But he's been taking alcohol. See, look at that. Now he's taking alcohol, so and he's also a smoker. So nothing prevents him from not having a chronic liver disease.
Chronic liver disease.
HCC, decompensation history is very important in this patient.
Okay.
Yeah, and for the pancreas, of course, recurrent abdominal pain in the past.
Okay, madam.
And if the patient is from Northeast, then you have to ask for family history of polycystectomy. Very important.
Okay,
Northeast. Or if the patient has had a gallstone and that was removed and therefore has had a polycystectomy. These are the things that cross your mind, because you're considering on one hand gallbladder cancer. Risk. And the risk of gallbladder cancer would be Northeast or patients from northern parts of the country, and history of polycystectomy. Okay, so these are the things.
Okay, madam.
Okay, so there is history of alcoholism, and he's a smoker.
Yeah. Smoking, madam.
Summarize.
A 62-year-old male with upper abdominal pain with moderate severity.
Background means chronic alcohol and smoking. Okay, so what's your diagnosis? Etiology.
Madam, patient having a cholestatic jaundice. Cholestatic jaundice with
that's the first is syndromic is just cholestatic jaundice. Next, etiology, extrahepatic versus intrahepatic, and give the extrahepatic causes. What are the possible extrahepatic causes? One, gallbladder cancer, you said. Number two,
pancreatic
pancreas. Hylar cholangial carcinoma, unlikely because pain is not significant.
Yes, madam.
Ampullary carcinoma, also less likely because pain
Less
is
likely.
most significant. So therefore, your DD for extrahepatic would be gallbladder cancer,
Gallbladder.
carcinoma head.
Pan-
And
pancreatic.
intrahepatic polystatic would be hepatocellular carcinoma with nodes at the porta. You have to consider a differential of that as well because we
Yes,
not
madam.
examined the patient, okay?
Okay, madam.
And then say with comorbidity of diabetes
Yes, madam.
and in a background of smoking and alcohol and performance,
Okay.
you have to mention that, okay? On examination.
General examination,
What
weight
does
is
it
60.
look for typically?
Madam,
What
I
does
would
it
want to,
look for?
this patient, I would want to look for a stigmata of liver disease, chronic liver disease. And I would want to look for, madam,
BMI.
a patient had a significant alcoholic history for almost 30 years. I would want to look for a stigmata of chronic liver disease. And even I would want to look for a cutaneous sign of malignancy, pancreatic adenocarcinoma, like new onset of acanthosis nigricans, or if there is any
The cutaneous markers of pancreatic malignancy.
acanthosis nigricans, which is new onset, probably was indicate worsening of diabetes.
More important, Trousier sign and
Trousier sign, yeah, left supraclavicular lymph node.
Trousier and Trousier, two signs. These are the two
Yes.
important, and Sister Mary Joseph nodule. Three signs that you
Yes.
look. Acanthosis is more for esophageal and gastric cancers.
Yes,
For
ma'am.
pancreatic, it's basically left supraclavicular lymph node, migrating thrombophlebitis, and Sister Mary Joseph nodule. Okay.
Yes,
These
ma'am.
are the three cutaneous markers that you look for in pancreatic cancer.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So nothing is there.
Yes.
And palpation.
Abdominal palpation, liver is palpable, 3 centimeter below the costal margin, firm, non-tender, surface and margins are smooth. Another globular mass, 4 into 3 centimeters, felt below the lower margin of the liver, moving with respiration, firm, non-tender, smooth surface, limited vertical and horizontal mobility, and mass is the mass is intra-abdominal. The mass appears to be enlarged gallbladder.
How do you make sure that?
Sir?
How will you make sure that the mass which you feel below the liver is gallbladder? What are the other features?
One, usually it will be the mobility pattern, sir. Usually gallbladder will be having horizontal mobility and won't be having vertical mobility. And other one is it moves with dullness, continues with the liver dullness.
Okay.
So, and this suggests most likely that they are gallbladder.
Okay. In a case of CA gallbladder, the mobility may be restricted.
May be restricted.
Because normally in a benign enlargement of gallbladder, one may expect horizontal mobility, some degree of horizontal mobility, but in a malignant gallbladder mass, it may not be there. Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
And it will be more hard, and it will not have the typical globular.
Yeah, it may be slightly nodular, it may
hard.
Yeah.
Hard mass, and then the differential comes for an exophytic hepatocellular carcinoma.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a hard mass.
Yes, ma'am.
DD would be an exophytic hepatocellular carcinoma.
Exophytic SCC is positive.
Yeah, but once it is globular mass, then it's easy to very well describe. I think the PGs and all should know how to describe. What they expect you is two important questions that they often ask. Is there an intrinsic mobility or not? This is what is most important. So you have to mention this. There's a limited vertical and horizontal mobility is very important. And conclude by saying that the mass is intra-abdominal. Sir has described it very nicely. So please note, this is how you have to describe the gallbladder mass. So what's your diagnosis now?
Madam, it looks like most likely a CA.
Yeah, now you just tell. Never ever use all
CA gallbladder, madam. CA gallbladder.
CA gallbladder. Okay. Can it be carcinoma head of pancreas? Why do you say it is CA? Why do you say CA gallbladder?
One is the
it's a firm mass.
It continues with the liver margin. Other one is moving with the respiration, and it is these two most likely
considers a gallbladder malignancy and not just a palpable gallbladder.
Yes, madam.
We just now mentioned the differences, no? More likely,
yes,
nodular, hard, more fixed, all those reasons. Here it's smooth.
Just a smooth surface is and sir is also written it's an enlarged gallbladder. Why? This is where people make mistakes.
So it is either enlarged gallbladder without neoplasm or gallbladder with neoplasm. Okay, here you have to decide which is first, whether it is CA endopancreas or whether it is GB carcinoma. What do you think is more likely? And you must also, in such situation, look at the prevalence of illness. In South India, how often you get GB carcinoma, which is more prevalent?
See, it is more prevalent in North India compared to South. But
It hardly ever
it can occur. It can occur, but it is very rarely.
Very rarely, sir.
If you
Yes,
take
sir.
100 cases, you may get 1 case of gallbladder cancer.
Suppose this you are appearing for exam in North Indian Center. I think you
Yes,
should have
yes,
jumped
sir.
and probably made a diagnosis of you have to err on the side of CA gallbladder, because that will be most likely in a North Indian situation.
In any,
Okay,
yeah, that's a dictum. If the person is from North India, in a patient cholestatic jaundice, GB cancer has to come as the first differential. On the other hand, if you're in down south, people from north do not know the prevalence of gallbladder cancer below. So therefore, you have to consider both the possibilities.
okay, sir. Okay, madam.
In fact, if the examiner is from North India, you have to, that's the way we manipulate, and that's how we discuss even in the exam. That
Okay, madam.
then you can even say it's while gallbladder cancer is more than North and South. Based on this particular examination, I feel it's more just a palpable gallbladder. However, intraluminal gallbladder malignancy cannot be ruled out. So I would like to consider the possibility first as carcinoma of pancreas with a palpable gallbladder, and number two would be an intrinsic gallbladder malignancy in a patient with a palpable gallbladder. What are the two investigations you'll ask from this patient? Just two investigations.
Ultrasound abdomen.
So ultrasound scan of abdomen with Doppler and
Doppler and
and
liver function.
That's all. Liver biochemistry. You ask the liver biochemistry and ultrasound. So what's the liver biochemistry? Phosphatase is 210.
Bilirubin is 14.2. Total bilirubin. Conjugated bilirubin is 9.3. AST and ALT 102 and 82. ALP is elevated 210. Total protein is 6.8. Albumin 3.5. Globulin 3.3.
Can we have the ultrasound?
Ultrasound.
Yeah, what's it?
Ultrasound shows there is an IHPRD and there is a gallbladder is distended and
linked to the CBD.
CBD is dilated, madam.
It is as dilated as the portal vein. So this is called as double barrel sign. That is what is typical. Sir has shown is double barrel sign. When the portal vein, when the CBD becomes as dilated as the portal vein, that is 1.1 centimeter, it is called as a double barrel sign. And other signs you look for are double duck sign, double barrel sign, and you look for a cigar butt sign, cigar butt. Cigar butt is more for cholangiocarcinomas, distal. So here you have hepatomegaly, dilated, CBD is 1 centimeter, bulky head of pancreas. So what should you do now? What do you want next?
I would want to get a CT abdomen. With
you have a CT with you, you have an MRI with you, you have EUS with you. What would be your choice of investigation?
Madam, CT will be the CT abdomen with thorax will be first this one, the ease of convenience of diagnosis and even the.
Did you mention anything specifically when you asked for the CT?
CT, I would want to look for one pancreatic protocol. Since there is CBD dilatation and this one, I would want to look for pancreatic protocol, madam.
Yeah, so you have to ask for a pancreatic protocol. You have the CT?
Madam?
Okay, read the CT.
CT abdomen, mass lesion, head of pancreas 16 to 6 centimeter, dilated CBD, PD narrowed inside the mass, lesion abating the SMV, portal vein confluence, 120 degree, celiac axis, celiac trunk intact, peripancreatic node 12 mm, no free fluid, no liver or lung mets.
Yeah, so what do you think?
Madam, this looks like a T3 lesion and not involved.
Can you tell the staging?
Staging, stage 3 disease, stage 3.
So T1 is stage 1?
T1 without any nodes, sir. Without nodal involvement, without any metastasis. No, stage.
So the size of the mass matters.
2 centimeter. 2 centimeters.
Yeah, this
less
is
centimeter.
More than 2 centimeters. So,
yes, sir. And
so
even
stage 1 is less than 2, stage 2 is more than 2, And then
more than. Stage
stage
3 is
3,
involvement of portal vein and confluence, and without involvement of celiac trunk. T3, and T4 is involvement of the celiac trunk and nodes N0 and N1 and with metastasis and without metastasis.
what is this degree of involvement, abutment?
That indicates that more than 180 degree indicates that there is a portal vein confluence involvement, and most likely that there is that indicate the resectability status, whether there is borderline resectability or unresectable cases. It can
So
be
according to
decided.
this CT, which says the liver, no liver and lung mets, and betting less than around 120 degree. What do you think? Do you think it is resectable?
This is borderline resectability. SMV and portal vein confluence is involved, and if at all there is a SMV and portal vein can be reconstructed, and there is sufficient use, this can be into a borderline resectability. And before
Will you
that,
do any further investigations?
Before going for this one, I would want to look for, before surgery, want to go for a diagnostic labs, because there is a 12 peripancreatic node, 12 mm. So,
and the lesion is very
the
big
patient
lesion, 6 centimeter.
Status,
yeah.
Yes, sir.
So very likely that there could be very tiny nodules on the liver, on the intestine, on the stomach, on peritoneum, etc., which means it is a unresectable lesion. So diagnostic laparoscopy. Would you like to confirm the diagnosis by any means?
Presently, if at all it is unresectable plan, then probably US FNA can be done for this one. Or
if it is potentially resectable, will you go and do US FNA?
Potentially, US FNA should not be done, sir.
Ideally, should not be done. If at all your surgeon wants, then how will you do? What will be the approach?
You should go for a duodenal, and if at all better to take it from that one, because that area will be resected.
It is easy to do an FNA from the antrum because you can pass a bigger needle. But here in case you have, once you reach the C loop, you have to use 25 gauge needle in US, and it will be difficult, and the tissue obtained will also be very little. Okay, what is ROSE?
Rapid on-site
evaluation. Okay, that actually helps you to. Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is the MRCP.
Yes, sir.
So, may I ask one question? Will you go for?
This is a cigar butt sign. Terminal end. Okay.
Okay. So, if you have MR and MRCP and CT in your institution, which one you prefer?
In our institution, we usually prefer CT, sir.
Okay, then it also depends upon the expertise with the MRCP also. Just because you have the MR machine is not important. The person behind the machine interpreting it also very important. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so there suggests FNA correlation, and this is EUS and a typical cell highly malignancy. With this picture, do you think is there any other differential diagnosis? Just given this CT and MRI and EUS picture, do you think there is any differential diagnosis?
Pancreatic other differential diagnosis.
For this appearance. Suppose I say actually the patient had benign disease and everything else.
Pancreatitis is one possibility, but the thing is
the CA99 is 102. What is your interpretation?
It is presently, I mean, there is a jaundice of 14 presently cannot be interpreted in the glossary level, but it is not significant enough. But in
he has a biliary obstruction. Okay, so the cutoff may not be relevant, and especially if pharyngitis is also there, this may not be relevant, but it is elevated anyway. Okay, so how will you manage staging? You already tell, and what are the non-pancreatic indication of non-resectability?
Non-pancreatic, one generalized performance status. Patient is other comorbidities, other organ status.
Okay. Do you think a PET CT is required?
Pancreatic, this one presently there is CT is fine. PET CT is not going to alter management since we are having a histological diagnosis right now, and presently is not going to add anything more to the present diagnosis. Since until unless borderline resectability, we are planning for surgery.
Just keep your mic a little away or you're echoing.
Do you think there is a need for preoperatively biliary drainage in this case?
Preoperative, and there is, if the presence of patient doesn't have a cholangitis, if the presence of cholangitis probably require a preoperative biliary drainage, otherwise not to be done.
Okay,
If you're planning for surgery.
routinely it is not done, but if the jaundice is very high, or if
Yes.
The patient, if you, it is marginally resectable, if you are planning to have a neoadjuvant chemotherapy, or if the patient fitness has some issues, and then if you are slightly delayed to do surgery, then one may have to do biliary drainage. Routinely, it is not done. Okay, what is surgery done for CA HOP?
Whipple's procedure, sir.
Okay, you know the 5-year survival in a CA head of pancreas?
If stage 1 usually will have a good prognosis, especially with the T1 lesion. I think it is. I mean, even
with the stage one even if it is resectable,
20,
the 5-year survival is only 25%. So
20%.
CA pancreas is basically the survival, and even with the best of treatment, is not that much. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And even if it is CT operable, on the table you find that majority are not operable.
Large number of patients which are otherwise operable on CT, when you open up, you find that it's not operable. That is why a staging laparoscopy is done in most of the cases. Yes, what do you do after the surgery? Will you follow it up with the radiation or chemo? And if so, what sort of
this patient treatment is already having confluence involvement with the size is almost 6 centimeter with the peripancreatic small lymph nodes. So he requires post-operative, even post-operative chemotherapy with probably gemcitabine or FOLFIRINOX regimen. And with radiotherapy, plus or minus role, thing can be tried presently. I mean.
Okay. What are the expected complications in this patient?
This patient can have post-pancreatic, they can have hemorrhage, they can have leak, biliary leak, bile duct injuries, and even cholangitis, and ischemia, hepatic artery injury and hepatic ischemia, and nutritional complication.
Doctor, you just classify it as early, that is during immediate post-operative, and then you put late complications.
Okay, madam.
Late complications, sometimes you get obstruction to the hepatico-jejunostomy site. No? That's quite common. And if you don't have an access to it, then you have major issues.
Yes, madam.
Okay. You should also know about the pain management.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Suppose this patient was found to be inoperable, unresectable on laparoscopy, then you will be left with palliative care, maybe chemo, radiation. And then how do you manage the pain of the patient?
Pain, step-up therapy can be tried. One, the patient should be given with the oral medications, and if at all this not this one, start off from a paracetamol and slowly increase to the opiates, and even gabapentin and other medication, morphine can be tried. If it is still not reducible, other endoscopic and other CT-guided interventional radiological procedure can be done.
What is the name of the procedure?
Celiac plexus block can be done, either endoscopy, EUS guided or CT guided. Or
block is actually temporary with the local anesthetic. I think you have to do neurolysis with the alcohol.
Neurolysis.
Yes.
Neurolysis. Block is purely temporary. That is done for benign conditions. But for malignant condition, you require much more prolonged results. No? So you can try it. Of course, it can be done CT guided, and of course we have EUS, so we can do it also on EUS guided. Okay. Is there any other use with EUS on a therapeutic?
Sir, even therapeutic chemotherapeutic drugs can be injected, especially if at all small lesions, if at all not surgically.
You mean to say intralesional injection?
Intralesional injection.
What is fiducial placement?
I didn't get you, sir.
Okay. Fiduce or something like that. Small pellets of medicine can be. That is what you are told. Okay. Anything else, ma'am?
Yeah, I think that is fine. Yeah, and I think they should know all these the various chemotherapeutic agents and the role. No, this I mean, not a definite case for Whipple's. At the same time, can you downstage today there are these, this interstitial, what's it called, radiotherapy, that is SBRT and other forms of radiation therapy where you can reduce the size of the tumor and then go for a second stage surgery.
Yes, sir.
Just
Downstaging.
Downstaging, yeah. So
Yeah, that is done when the lesion is marginally resectable. Yeah.
Marginally resectable. So in such situation, just know what are the various options that are available.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so ma'am, just can you summarize the learning point? Meanwhile, I request anyone to open up. You can actually unmute and ask any doubts now.
Questions. Autoimmune pancreatitis will not come as a DD in this particular patient. And
Yeah, autoimmune pancreatitis, the pain, probably this much pain is unusual, but obstructive jaundice and mass lesion in the head of pancreas, I think autoimmune also should be kept in the differential diagnosis, at least after seeing the imaging.
gallbladder palpability is uncommon, so therefore autoimmune pancreatitis.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, so therefore autoimmune pancreatitis will not come. I think basically summarizing, see, you have had two cases today. One was totally intrahepatic cholestatic jaundice, but you have to consider some of the overlaps, autoimmune hepatitis, and by history taking and examination, you have to tell that it is definitely not extrahepatic and you vouch more for an intrahepatic. And in the second patient, I think if I was the candidate, what I would do is, to me, it is very simple. Abdomen has only a few things to be palpated, liver, gallbladder, spleen, and kidneys. That's all. Or a lung. So just start asking the name of the patient, put your hand on the abdomen, and you've already noticed jaundice, and you find the gallbladder is palpable. Finished. Then you sit down and start taking the history, guide it towards the gallbladder, and guide it towards the pancreas. So you will not waste time. Instead of taking a long history and then opening up the Pandora's box and suddenly you find, oh God, there's a gallbladder that's palpable. See, this is an art, when you get a cholestatic jaundice or jaundice patient comes with history of jaundice, make the patient lie down, quickly palpate the liver and look for the gallbladder and look for the spleen, that's all. And look for the systematic Joseph nodule. Once you find gallbladder is palpable, then you sit and ask what's the history of pain and direct your history of the pain so that you can target the gallbladder or the pancreas. That's the way it is, that it is a combination of examination. So don't say that history said that, but on examination it's this. It will never happen like that. Either your history is wrong or your examination is wrong. In the first case, if I were to see, I would just find a liver that's palpable, gallbladder not palpable. So I've got a history of fatigue, I've got a history of this. So I'll shift my history more towards intrahepatic and go on a softer symptom analysis of the extrahepatic. In the second case, gallbladder is palpable, I'll push my history towards extrahepatic. At the same time, I have to consider intrahepatic, where patient has loss of weight, loss of appetite. However, the liver is not, but that is on palpation. But history taking, I have to consider the possibility of a neoplastic lesion arising from the liver. Very important. And as you rightly said, one of the student did mention about carcinoma colon. Yes, I agree. Secondaries, you have to ask for the bowel pattern, the stomach, pancreas, and colon are three important conditions where you can get secondaries in the liver. But then the primary symptoms will be manifesting more than the findings in the liver. Okay, and very well presented. I mean, it was both the candidates did a good job, I think. And just read a little bit more in detail about the chemo, RT, and all those marginally resectable and all that. Okay, that's more for theory discussion. Okay?
Yeah. That is only after you make a diagnosis.
Yeah. Once you come with a diagnosis, then the rest of the questions will all be theory, which you will all answer really well. Okay.
Any questions? Dr. Sojan, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here.
I am not finding the chat box. Have you disabled it?
Suspect overlap syndrome clinically. Overlap syndrome clinically is like in this patient. Patient has got cholestatic features and patient has got fatigue and patient has got jaundice. So there's no cholangitis. So you will keep a differential of overlap. At the same time, also consider the possibility of a truly extrahepatic. So overlap, in this particular case, I would consider more overlap rather than PBC or a PSC isolate. Pancreatic head mass and chronic pancreatitis. Patient should have symptoms of chronic pancreatitis, which is not there. The patient has started with a head mass, presently has obstructive jaundice with no major symptoms of recurrent abdominal pain. So these were the only questions, PT. No other questions. I think it was a good session because this way.
Anyone want to ask any burning questions? Nobody has asked so far. No questions.
I discussed
Last
the
minute.
chat box. I discussed the questions from the chat box.
Okay. Chat box, there are 9 questions.
Yeah, we answered most of them. Yeah,
You answered, no?
most of them.
Most of them. Okay.
SPA, hydrazine, everything.
So,
You can
okay,
click
so thanks both the residents Jagdish and Santosh for presenting it, and keep up reading. Read around the case, read the entire thing, and improve your theory knowledge as well as think clinically. Think as though you are in the ward, and then think about whatever you are reading from your textbooks. Okay, over to Dr. Sojan.
You all. It is my pleasant duty to propose a formal vote of thanks. I think like today was a fortunate day for most of our students because we had 2 of our best teachers in action, Jayanti ma'am and Varghese Thomas sir. And I should say that probably the sessions are having an effect because the level of happiness in the face of examiners is going up as days go by. So I think like our students have also picked up, and that is a big feedback, big positive feedback for our sessions. Thank you so much, Jayanti ma'am and Varghese Thomas sir. And I should say that Jayanti ma'am was my examiner. And today I remember the day when she saved my day by telling this was a case for me, and I Saraswat sir was very particular that I should have answered CAGB first. So she told come on, he comes from an area where he would not have even seen a case of CAGB. And that is how I escaped. So thank you so much once again to both Jayanti ma'am, Varghese sir, and both of the students for presenting it so well. With that, I think we can close the session. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night. Good night. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. We'll meet next Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.